Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to take a look at exchange rates and actually more specifically, kind of take a look at exchange rate policy. So it's a little bit of a technical one, just like the previous module with real exchange rates and all that stuff was kind of technical. So it's a good thing that you're here, right? We're going to do some practice together. So it says draw a diagram similar to figure 43.1 representing the foreign exchange situation of China when it kept its exchange rate fixed at a target rate of 0.121 dollars per yuan, and the market equilibrium rate was higher than the target rate. Then show the diagram how each of the following changes would eliminate the disequilibrium in the market. So 43.1, I've seen it, but it looks like basically this picture on the right. So they fixed the exchange rate so that basically the ratio of dollars per yuan was below where it should be. So if we have kind of the picture, it would be like quantity of yuan, and then we have like, Chinese yuan and US dollars. So it's dollars per yuan. And so this is the Chinese yuan market. And so they have this demand for yuan and supply for yuan. And the equilibrium rate, we're not really sure what it was. Maybe it was, like 25 cents per yuan. But what they set it at was 0.12. And so they fixed it there. Now, the problem with doing that, right, is that it creates a shortage, which was the perennial issue, was they have this kind of shortage of yuan. And if they had allowed that shortage to kind of exist, eventually the price would have been bid up to 25 cents per yuan, and that's what the market price of a yuan would have been 25 cents. But the Chinese government wanted to keep it low so that they could encourage exports, right? By doing this, they would keep their exports much cheaper for foreigners to buy. So these different scenarios, right? How would these different things change the picture that we've drawn? So we're actually going to kind of like redraw some other sketches to show what it would do. Allowing the exchange rate to float more freely, would just basically cause the equilibrium to result, right? So you would go from like whatever that was, and it would just go up to the equilibrium, supply and demand. So the new one would be 0.25. That would solve the shortage, right? If you just stopped interfering. Part B says placing restrictions on foreigners who want to invest in China. So if you're thinking about like what would that do, and again, you can kind of sketch this out yourself here quicker than probably I can. But if you have this shortage and we restrict foreigners from coming in and wanting to invest in China, then it's going to decrease the demand for Chinese yuan, right? It makes the demand decrease for yuan. And so then, the new equilibrium is no longer that 25 cents. The new equilibrium is the 12 cents. So if we restrict foreigners from coming in and purchasing our stocks, bonds, and real estate, it can push down the demand for our currency if we're China, and then actually clear that shortage. Part C says removing restrictions on Chinese who want to invest abroad. And they did that as well, right? In order to keep that currency artificially cheap, they had to do a variety of techniques to keep the currency cheap and encourage their exports. And so remember, we were at 25 and we fixed it here at 0.12. And if we said that the Chinese people who want to invest abroad, that they're free to do so, well, they would be exchanging their yuan for US dollars or pounds or euros or whatever. But in order for them to invest abroad, they have to supply more yuan into the market. And so that increases the supply, and again, pushes us to the equilibrium level, and the quantity and the shortage is cleared. So we no longer have that shortage. Part D says imposing taxes on Chinese exports, such as clothing. And that would make it more expensive for foreigners to come in and purchase Chinese goods. So that reduces kind of the demand for those goods, right? And so they're not going to buy as many because those Chinese goods are not as competitive, which indirectly would solve this problem, because it would be the same as what we have here, because it would reduce the demand for the yuan. Now, out of all of those options, right, the one that doesn't make sense to the Chinese government would be imposing taxes on their exports, because the whole point of keeping their currency artificially cheap is to encourage exports. So they wouldn't have done that. But what they did do was B and C. They restricted foreigners who wanted to invest in Chinese assets like stocks, bonds, and real estate. And it is still quite difficult for foreigners to buy Chinese stocks, Chinese bonds, and Chinese real estate. And likewise, they encourage Chinese people to go and invest abroad because then that supply of yuan is increased in the Forex market. Now let's take a look at the multiple choice questions. Okay. Question number 1 says, which of the following methods can be used to fix a country's exchange rate at a predetermined level? Using Forex reserves to buy their own currency. Yeah, you could do that. Using monetary policy to change the interest rates. That's another way that you can affect the demand for your currency. And implementing Forex controls by increasing or restricting what people can do with it in terms of Forex. So all 3 of those are correct. So E. Number 2, changes in exchange rates affect which of the following? So they would affect exports, and so they would affect imports as well. If they affect net exports, then we know they affect aggregate demand, and that therefore affects aggregate output. So all of the above is the correct answer here. Number 3 says the U.S. has which of the following exchange rate regimes? That's a way of saying like what type of exchange rate system do they have? And we have a float, so our currency is floating. There are some people who argue that our currency is that the Fed indirectly tries to keep our currency cheap, but I'll be honest and say they don't do a very good job of it. If that's their real goal, they're not succeeding very well, because the U.S. currency is actually a pretty strong currency, which is not good for exporters. Which of the following interventions would be required to keep a country's exchange rate fixed if the equilibrium rate in the market were below the fixed rate? So in other words, like you want to keep your currency value artificially high, which is a little weird. You wouldn't normally want to do that. I don't know why you would do that. You would hurt your exporting industries. I guess, it would help you import more, but most of the time you don't really want to do that. Anyways, so you want to bid up the price of your own currency. So you could buy your domestic currency, right? That's an option there. Selling your domestic currency would actually reduce the price of your currency, so that wouldn't be what you want to do. Buying the foreign currency would actually make your currency cheaper, so that's not the goal either. Lowering domestic interest rates would also be a problem because if you lower your interest rates, then people around the world don't want to buy your stocks, bonds, and real estate, and so they don't need your currency. So then that would bring the value of your currency down. And E, removing foreign exchange controls would interfere with your ability to fix the rate, basically. So correct answer here is A, buying your own currency, because that bids up the price of your currency. So A. Number 5, which of the following is a benefit of a fixed exchange rate system? Certainty about the value, sure. Commitment to inflationary policies? Not really. No, it actually messes with your ability to do that. No need for Forex reserves. No, you have to have them to do it, really. Allows unrestricted use. No. So the correct answer here is A, certainty about your value of your domestic currency. It's kind of a weird question as well. I think it's more likely, you'd see a question more similar to the 4th one, which is like, how do you actually accomplish the goal? Like, how do you keep your currency artificially expensive or artificially cheap? That's more valuable for us to understand. Let's take a look at number 2. List 3 tools used to fix exchange rates. Explain the major costs associated from each. So free response, number 2. So the first tool is, is set the interest rate, high or low. And so the goal of changing your interest rate would be that if you have very low interest rates, then people around the world don't want to buy your bonds, right? Your stocks, bonds, and real estate. And so you keep the interest rate really low, then people are going to go, I don't want to buy your bonds. So then they don't demand your currency, and so your currency's cheap. The problem, right, or the cost problem is you give up monetary policy, right? So the trade-off there is you really can't use monetary policy very well to do other things if you're prioritizing setting that. You could have Forex controls. So Forex controls on your people. And so this, then you could restrict basically their ability to buy and sell your currency in foreign exchange markets. The problem is it interferes with international trade, interferes with trade. And then the third one is you can buy and sell your own currency. So like if you were China and you wanted your currency to be really cheap, you could sell your own currency and try to buy up basically US dollars. The problem with that approach is it requires large spending on foreign currency. So basically, you have to dedicate a chunk of your budget towards buying up other countries' currencies, and then you just sit on them. You can't do anything with it, and so it's kind of a drag a little bit in that sense, that where you're just spending your own money to buy U.S. dollars, and then you stick them in your pocket. That's another downside of that. All right, so hopefully this helped you understand kind of the different exchange rate systems and how they can be accomplished, and I'll see you next time.